Hey, good morning. It's Patricia Murphy. It's Monday. This is Seattle Now. We love our trees here in the evergreen state. Now, Washington has a new plan it says would conserve public forests, fight climate change, and make the state money. Seattle Times environment reporter Lynda Mapes will explain in a minute. But first, let's get you caught up. The months-long concrete strike that's been slowing construction projects all over the metro area appears to be over. On Friday, the Teamsters said they'll send more than 300 drivers back to work today. There's no deal right now, so negotiating will continue. The companies welcome the news and say they'll be ramping back up to get through all the backlogged work. No official news on the Alaska Airlines pilot shortage situation. Just lots of angry people on Twitter complaining about ruined travel plans. The airline said late last week it knows it's let people down with what it called an unusual number of cancellations. Alaska says it's reducing service by 2% through the end of June to get things leveled out. The FlightAware website says Alaska canceled more than 60 flights at SeaTac over the weekend. And how about this? Soon, for the first time in more than 2 years, you'll be able to buy food and grab a beer on the ferry again. The Kitsap Sun reports that the ferry's food service contractor is gearing up to bring back galley service mid-month. Don't expect full service at first. Things are just getting started, but keep an eye out for food options soon on San Juan, Bainbridge, Bremerton, and Edmonds boats. Washington is home to a lot of land owned by the government, and not all of it is protected. Our public forests are often cut down to raise money for things like libraries, hospitals, and schools. But that's changing. Washington's Commissioner of Public Lands is preserving 10,000 acres of forest as carbon offsets. Companies can pay to sponsor the forest and offset their carbon emissions. This will help combat climate change. It might end up making the state even more money than cutting the trees down. Lynda Mapes is here to tell us more. She's an environment reporter at the Seattle Times. Lynda, really good to have you back. Thanks.
Thanks, Patricia. It's great to be here.
So carbon offset is a word I hear, but I don't get. What is this thing?
Yeah, it's not a very helpful term, but it actually is pretty simple. So if you look around and you see these big glorious trees all around us, they are using the CO2, the carbon in the air, as their food. And they take in carbon dioxide through little tiny mouths on the underside of their leaves and stash that carbon away through the magical zap of photosynthesis to convert it to leaves, roots, branches. And you know what? That's right where that carbon stays as long as that tree lives. And then even after it dies, it's locked up in the decaying wood and then it stays in the soil. So if you think about a lockbox of carbon, that is what we're accomplishing whenever we let a tree grow. And that is why something like this carbon reserve can help us blunt some of the worst effects of climate change, in addition, of course, to maintaining for human benefit, beauty, cultural importance, biodiversity, these gorgeous legacy forests.
You know, that's a really helpful explanation, Lynda. Let's talk a little bit about legacy forests. Tell me what they are.
So legacy forests, this is a term that has only just recently come into our conversation as a community. And what it refers to are these forests that grew up after the early clear cuts, that is 1900s, 1890s, 50s, 60s, 40s. You know, these are sloppy cuts, beautifully sloppy cuts. They're done without industrial techniques. We're talking about people with saws and teams of oxen. And so they took the biggest and they left the rest, which today are 140, 160-year-old trees. And they're not big enough to qualify or old enough to qualify as old growth, which is a specifically defined thing under Washington state regulations. Those trees are protected. But there's still this whole other class of trees out there, which are not plantation clear-cut regrowth. They are not old growth, but they are glorious forests. And you know what? You know them when you see them. You walk in, there's that beautiful diversity of species. There's the whole understory suite of life. You hear the birds. You see the complex canopy. You see a whole variety of age classes of trees. You know you're in something special that matters. And you ask yourself, tell me again why we're cutting this? And so the Commissioner of Public Lands, Hilary Franz, now has a new tool at her disposal by which to conserve special forests like this. It isn't just an age. She can look at other things, such as importance to indigenous communities, importance to local communities, watershed protection, erosion control, importance to biodiversity, rare and threatened species. So, if you look at the colors on your palette, we just put a whole lot more on. And those are really important tools today for our community as we just frankly try to survive what's coming and what's here as climate change bears down.
Trees are obviously magnificent to look at. They make us feel better when we walk amongst them, right? It's great. But what are the other benefits of keeping forests standing?
So the benefits of forests, golly, this is one of my favorite things to think and talk about. If you look at our planet, these green living lungs, this is what has the potential to help us stave off the worst of climate change. Globally, we're talking 30% of the emissions from our fossil fuel burning are taken in, turned into beautiful leaves, roots, branches, trees. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we have particular species of trees, west of the Cascades especially, that can endure for centuries. I mean, you want to take one of creation's greatest hits. Let's talk about Douglas fir. Now, here's something to think about. Here's a tree that can live 800 years, and it can be hundreds of feet high, and it's got bark that'll plate on as much as almost a foot thick, so it survives fire. It just stands there year after year, and even better, after it finally falls, it stays as a fallen log for centuries. And so you want to talk about carbon sequestration. That's the gold right there. Not only that, but Western red cedar. This is a tree. The tree of life is what the first people here call it, because it gives and it gives and it gives century after century after century. So we're blessed west of the Cascades in these moist forests that really don't burn. Nothing like on the east side, both with the species mix and the perfect climatic conditions to grow these really old, enduring forests. And these really continue in a belt, Patricia, from southeast Alaska all the way down to Northern California. This is the special stuff. They rival the ones that get all the attention in the Amazon and so forth. I always say this to people. They say, well, what can I do? What can I do? Number one, plant a tree, protect a tree, save a tree. It is maybe one of the few things in our world that can never be a wrong action. It is absolutely a saving grace for our planet to plant a tree, save a tree, protect a tree.
Lynda, I could listen to you talk about trees forever, honestly. It's clear, the love, and I learned so much. But trees are also a commodity, and if the state isn't making money from logging, they have to do it some other way. The idea here is to have companies pay to lease these trees to balance out the carbon footprint. Does this seem like an effective strategy economically?
I say Shazam, brilliant. It's like, why didn't we do this a long time ago? I mean, it's interesting talking to the Enviros yesterday. They were like, yeah, we've been telling them this for decades and years that we should be realizing these co-benefits of our forests. It's not just, money for the school trust. These are benefits for all people, for all time. And who knows, maybe it'll really take off. I mean, 10,000 acres, that's a tiny little smidge. That's like 0.5% of what's out there. Meanwhile, there's like 90 legacy forests on the block right now for sale, right now. So a little bit in a big problem. And in terms of wood supply, look, we need wood. Wood is essential. We have a lot of forest land in Washington that's already in plantation status. It's a crop. It's not like we're going to run out of wood if we preserve more of these legacy forests. We have tons of already converted wood. The conversation is about keeping the natural legacy forests we have left and utilizing these plantations that we already have out there more productively. I mean, right now we're doing 40-year rotations on those lands. We have the most, by far and away, I want to call this out, we have the most progressive forestry policies in the country in Washington. We should feel proud about that. Can always be better, and this move towards the carbon reserve is a step towards better. But don't think that now suddenly there's not going to be any wood out there. There's a lot of lumber being cut from forests on both private and state lands still today. This is a tiny little thing.
And companies have to buy into this. What if they're not interested?
I think they'll be interested. Like, why wouldn't you? If you're Microsoft, if you're Alaska Airlines, and you're out there spewing, why wouldn't you want to get the PR plus of saying, hey, we just spent whatever, we just threw down to keep the Evergreen State green forever. And I just can't believe there won't be people who are interested in this. I'm very interested to see who steps up. The anticipation, we're told, is that it will be large corporations. And this whole business of carbon credits and verifying them to make sure it isn't just greenwashing, there's lots to follow up on here. What does it really amount to? How does it really work? Who steps up? How is it verified? Et cetera, et cetera. But yesterday was about breaking the news and putting it out there. And now we all need to make sure that we get what was promised, which is true carbon sequestration on state lands and long-lasting benefits for forests, for biodiversity, and for people.
Lynda, I'm hearing what you're saying about this being a great opportunity for companies, larger companies, to, do something good. It's also probably going to be a fraction, right, of their overall budgets, not a lot of money.
Right.
The greenwashing thing is very real here. What's it going to take for something like this to actually move the needle?
Yeah, I think mostly what you need is a whole lot more of it. Talking with Jerry Franklin, the eminent forest ecologist who helped teach us a lot of what we know today about old growth trees and natural forest ecosystems, how they work, why they matter. Talking with him about this, he said, this is very nice, but this is kind of a toy program compared to the real deal, which is the private lands. Because as I said earlier, that's where most of this wood is being cut. What's needed is for polluters to have to pay. As long as you can pollute for free, guess what people do? So if carbon was priced and it was a real deal rather than maybe in the future, maybe a little, it would be very compelling. Why don't we have some attention paid to the pervasive, pernicious pollution of carbon dioxide? I've often said if it wasn't invisible and it actually had a stink, we'd treat it differently. Just imagine it. If you could see it coming out of tailpipes, if you could see it coming out of your house, you'd be like, ugh. This is real. It's just like stormwater. We don't see it either spewing into Puget Sound. So it's out of sight, it's out of mind. But man, it's real. And it's hurting everything we care about in our life on this earth, including our potential to stick around. The planet will go on with or without us, no doubt about that. But if we're too stupid to get a grip on this, we won't. And people 600 million years from now will dig in our layer and say, who were they? They really liked plastic.
You heard it here.
Truth hurts. It's a fact. Mother Earth will go on, with or without us. That's the only question here. And how much collateral damage do we do along the way?
Really looking forward to you following this, Lynda Mapes. Always great to hear your insight on the environment. Lynda Mapes, environment reporter at the Seattle Times. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Patricia. Go take a walk in the woods.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to Seattle Now, and a special thank you to some of the listeners who made a donation to support the show during our spring membership drive. I'm talking to you, Kevin in Spokane, Phoebe in Lakewood, and Emily on Vashon. Thank you all so much for pitching in. We really appreciate you. We have a couple more people to thank, and it's not too late if you want to chip in. You can do it at the link in the show notes. Clare McGrane produced today's show. Matt Jorgensen does our theme music. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tomorrow.